want to defend my homeland, Sergeant.
Bullshit. Keep running.
Hunt down terrorists.
Well, let us know when you find them.
Bring democracy to Iraq.
Lynn, your stupidity is robbing this world of oxygen, and I won't stand for it. Get to the pull-up bar.
Private, did I say recover?
I did it for my sister.
Okay, drop.
Your sister? Continue, Private Lynn.
My sister, Catherine, sophomore year at college, was driving home from work. Heavy rain. Big Mercedes goes into a spin, broadsides her. Car's totaled. Fractured leg, pelvis, 170 stitches below the neck, 63 above. Cat was this angel.
You creep me out, Lynn. I know how you Texas boys are about your sisters.
Stay on point, Private.
My sister came this close to death. And then her pussy boy fiance dumps her in the hospital.
What did you do?
I sort of went and fucked up his car.
Seems like Private Lynn has an issue with vehicles.
What kind of car?
Brand new Saab convertible with graphite alloy rims. And I chased after him with a tire iron. Just wanted to see him around. My dad was able to get him to drop the charges if I went to the recruiter's office the next day. No regrets, sorry.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Schlock and Awe, a podcast where we unravel the cinematic universe of the global war on terror in the hope of answering the question, what's our generation's defining war movie? I'm Evan Hill.
And I'm Jack Crosby. We're two journalists who grew up in the post-9/11 era, and we've spent most of our careers covering the effects of those attacks and the wars the U.S. began after them. Today, we're discussing Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, director Ang Lee's 2016 drama about a young war hero grappling with PTSD and some serious psychosexual drama during the 2004 Thanksgiving Day NFL game. We're joined today by Nate Bethea, the host of the podcast Trash Future and What a Hell of a Way to Die, and a former Army infantry officer. Nate, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So before we get into it with Nate, I'll just give some quick context on this movie and when it was made, who made it. This is a movie that comes out in November 2016, even though it concerns events that occur sort of at the beginning of the War on Terror in 2004. It's released, on the verge of the Trump presidency, directed by Ang Lee, as you said, Jack, not the person who we would normally associate with making war movies. So it's, we'll talk a lot about the interesting choices that this movie makes that are different from our other GWAT films. It stars kind of a strange cast. Joe Alwyn, Taylor Swift's former longtime boyfriend, is the protagonist, Billy Lynn. Garrett Hedlund is sort of the hard-headed Sergeant Dimes, who's the head of the squad. Kristen Stewart does a pretty decent turn as Billy's sister, although we can get into some of that weird psychosexual drama that you mentioned. Vin Diesel is Sergeant Shroom, who sort of is the co-leader of the squad. He's kind of this like Zen Buddhist warrior. Another very interesting character that Nate, I would love to hear your opinion about his role in this film. And then those aren't even really like the top names, because we've got Chris Tucker as a Hollywood agent who's kind of trying to get Billy Lynn's squad a Hollywood deal. And then we've got Steve Martin in what I kind of found to be one of the more miscast roles of his career as the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, or at least a team that's definitely standing in for the Dallas Cowboys. This film's budget was about $40 million, but its worldwide box office to date is just about $31 million. So this qualifies as something of a flop. It was not a super popular movie, although it got some decent reviews, including in the New York Times. Most of them were mixed in the sense that they found it very interesting, but ultimately maybe didn't quite get where it wanted to go. This movie was sort of famously or infamously shot on an extra high frame rate of 120 frames per second, and in some theaters was actually released in 3D, which created this sort of more real than real sensation, which the movie's defenders have said is intentional. And we can kind of talk about this like sort of uncanny feeling that this film gives you while you're watching it. But I think for most people was kind of a failure. I think that this is probably the most well-regarded GWOT film that we've watched so far, at least sort of in terms of not falling prey to the jingoism of the other films. But Jack, why don't you give us some context about, the events that this film is depicting and the sort of historical setting in which it occurs?
Right. So what the book and the film itself really kind of take aim at, I think, is the initial sort of disenchantment of the wars in Iraq, which Iraq and Afghanistan, but this time, it's 2004. Afghanistan is basically completely forgotten at this point. It's all about Iraq and whether or not we're bringing democracy to this region. And so this takes place in the 2004 Thanksgiving Day football game, which is always played in by the Dallas Cowboys. It's this huge thing in Texas, flyovers, fireworks, song and dance, et cetera, et cetera. The halftime performance in the movie and the book revolves around a performance by Destiny's Child, famously doing their song Soldier, which, upon seeing this movie and hearing that song again, truly a banger, really goes off. But that's very much like where this film is coming from. It's when the troops were still being like triumphantly trotted out at every possible occasion in a way that we still do that. We've got soldier deployed reunites with daughter golden retriever at halftime in high school football game content that is still coming out to this day. But it's it doesn't hit like it did then. But what the book and the movie are really about is how different that experience was for people consuming it and watching it, and for the people that had actually experienced the wars up until that point. And the movie is really about this group of very traumatized young men being thrown into this extremely chaotic, sort of high pressure, high intensity situation, and kind of grappling with society's reaction to what they were doing for the first time and having it be completely at odds with what they've experienced. So we wanted to bring Nate on for this because, he served in the Army a few years later than the events of this film. Nate was in Afghanistan in the late 2000s and early 2010s. And Nate, I really wanted to, just kind of ask, how well do you think this movie captures that feeling of just sort of disorientation when you come home, from war? I think Evan and I have experienced that to a certain extent when we've come home from assignments overseas and stuff like that, in sometimes in hostile places. But I think it would be very different for someone who'd actually been there, participating in the war, and having the reaction to that be what everyone is focused on. They're focused on you and what you've done, right?
Yeah, and I would say that, well, I wanted to add something really quickly to the historical context that I think is relevant when I think back to that period, which is that, Bush had just won re-election in November 2004. And obviously there was this huge effort to sort of, when you think about Code Pink and a lot of the protests in 2004, to kind of pin their, at that point, failure of the Iraq war on Bush as trying to get him, ensure he wasn't reelected. And he was, if I remember correctly, elected with a larger majority of the vote, and also more control of Congress, Senate, et cetera, in 2004. But also November 2004 was one of the deadliest months in the Iraq war because it was when the Second Battle of Fallujah took place. And there was obviously the timing of Bush sort of waiting for the election to then do this thing that was going to be even less politically popular, because it was this massive, bloody sort of incursion to retake Fallujah from al-Qaeda in Iraq, who had been in control of the city since May of that year. I bring that up just because, to me, it's interesting because the book is somewhat divorced from that. The movie also, I think, has even more distance from the subject matter. And to answer your question, I think the thing about this is interesting is that I definitely would say I can identify with the feeling of sort of being bewildered by the way civilians react and talk to you about it. But I think it's obviously different in the situation of these guys because they're back together, A, as a group, and B, they are going to be going back to Iraq. They are not even on mid-tour leave. They're just on a sort of promotional junket. As I remember in the story, they are supposed to be in Iraq until the October of the following year. So they're pretty early, even which a little bit of a kind of a fudge on timing because they weren't quite at the point where active duty units were getting mega extensions on their deployments in '04. They did extend National Guard and Reserve units more, that was a little under the radar, but a 1st Infantry Division brigade getting extended, I don't know. So like that sort of implies that they were in their first real month in Iraq when the events that make them famous take place.
How long was a typical deployment for Army infantry in that period of time? Was it 13 months or?
They aimed for 12 months, basically. Once stop loss became very politically unpopular as it kind of emerged as a thing that was taken, because that was already starting to happen in '04. And for the benefit, because stop loss is very often misunderstood, and the movie Stop Loss doesn't really do much to help this. The way stop loss works basically is that if you have an enlistment contract and say you've enlisted for 3 years in the Army and your enlistment date is, such that like it's on June 1st of this year, you are going to be leaving the military. If your unit's deployment falls within, I believe it was 90 days of your get out of the Army date, you don't get to get out of the Army. You have to go on that deployment, stay on for the whole deployment until you come back, and then you can get out of the Army. So there was a thing called stop move, which was you're not allowed to, even if you were supposed to be on orders to change duty stations to a place that isn't going to be deploying, doesn't matter if you're within 90 days, they can keep you for the deployment. And stop loss, you were supposed to get out of the Army. Technically, it extends past your enlistment contract. Doesn't matter, they keep you. So that started happening earlier, but the extensions on units, that really started to happen in '05 and into '06. When things got, in February of '06, in, I believe it was Samarra, but I can't remember exactly. There was a very, very sacred site in Shia Islam that was destroyed by insurgents that kicked off basically a civil war in Iraq. Like they didn't want to acknowledge it at the time, but it got so violent in early '06, and that kind of led to the surge that they were extending units, active duty units that were supposed to be in for 12 months were getting 15-month deployments. That hadn't really become the norm in '04. So basically, but the point, this is kind of a roundabout way of answering the question. These guys aren't even on their mid-tour leave. Notionally, they've only been in country for about a month or so, and they have to go back after this thing. And so it's like there's a lot of kind of bewilderment, but I'll be perfectly honest, from my own experience, I was less bewildered by being back in the world when I was on mid-tour leave than I was when I first came back. But a lot of that was more of being kind of alone. When you're out in the world kind of dealing with stuff on your own, it's weird. It's just weird because it's such a disorienting effect. You haven't done this movie yet, I don't believe, on this podcast, but I think that's one of the rare ticks in the win column I would give to The Hurt Locker is weirdly it does a pretty good job of representing that. I think that smash cut back to Jeremy Renner's character just being kind of absolutely confused by the sort of largesse of the grocery store.
Right.
That's like weirdly accurate. This film, I think it doesn't, to me, a lot of the stuff is. It kind of fell flat on representing that sort of that feeling of being bewildered in terms of like being back. I think the weird encounters with civilians, the strangeness of constantly feeling as though you sort of exist as an object to civilians, which is a thing that I think even if you haven't deployed to combat, if you've experienced and you were in uniform during these years, is the thing you experienced. And I definitely think that the kind of like bantering between them, the way they're acting and the way it's kind of out of step with people's expectations, that landed quite well with me. And the same in the book too. It did a very good job.
Yeah.
But as far as that goes, like, I think it's different. I would say it was different because in this case, like, they're basically, the whole formation is traveling together. Like, it's less so like the kind of atomizing experience of coming back so much as it's sort of like they're there to kind of let people kind of vent their own sort of emotive feelings about the war and sort of redeem the war in the eyes of civilians. But it's just very strange, like I said, to be kind of objectified that way.
Just to sort of take us through a little bit of the first part of this movie is basically, I don't know how it is in the book, guys, but I think the movie is essentially one day, right? We've got 1 day of the squad going to the Thanksgiving Day Cowboys game, and intercut with flashbacks to Iraq. And a few of those flashbacks are sort of character development for Billy Lynn and who he is and his relationship with Sergeant Dime and Sergeant Shroom,
Yes.
building up to the sort of climactic incident that is supposed to, I think, sort of give this movie and the book, I assume, its higher emotional heft, which we will address later on. But it's, the death of a member of the squad.
That's very much how the book is structured.
Yes.
Too, and I think what actually one of the things that this movie and the book is successful in, and how it builds some of that sort of surreality of everything that's going on, is that the book and the movie as well are like, it's almost minute by minute. The movie obviously has to cut a little bit of this just for interest of time, but there's so much emphasis placed in long scenes on like one conversation and interaction with people that are happening, which makes you very much do feel like you are in Billy and these guys' heads, and you see it does. And I think the film does this pretty effectively too. You see them slipping basically in and out of reality when they're in this very like heady situation. And it's like, the thing about the book as well and the movie is like, they're all fucked up for all of this. Like Billy starts the movie drunk and like doesn't get sober for like all of it, and it's pretty much implied that none of them really are. Like a running plot, which I think has a little more emphasis in the book, but you definitely see it in the movie, is like Billy just trying to get someone to get him Advil the entire time and just not being able to get it.
The kind of like semi-helpful Dallas Cowboys apparatchik finally like tosses him some Advil, I think, like at the end of the movie. But
like as they're leaving.
One of the, so like they start off and like they're all at the hotel. Sergeant Dimes like assembles them. He's like the classic hard ass. Chris Tucker is there. Everyone's kind of like joking around, and they head to the game. And very soon we also meet Billy Lynn's sister, Kristen Stewart, who I think like one of her first lines of the movie that I have here in my notes is that she wants Billy to be out there getting some.
Their first lines
like,
to each other are horny. And she's like, have you been getting some? And then he's like, no, have you? Or something like that. 10 seconds. I'm sorry. I guess we're just getting into this right off the bat.
Yeah,
but like,
why not?
10 seconds later, he does the thing. He like brushes her hair out of her face to see like the car accident scars, and then like puts his hand like behind her head in a way that like, I mean, I don't know. I'm an only child, like relationships with siblings, who knows? But like, feels weird, man.
So Nate, you were saying in an email that the book is, if anything, weirder on this than the movie. But I just want, like, there's so many things about the acting and the things that occur in this movie that are unreal. And some of it works in the sense that like the soldier's experience is supposed to be a little unreal. And in fact, like, Billy Lynn's perspective wavers between like daydreams and reality and things that he wishes that they could say, but they can't say. But then there's aspects of it where I think the movie is trying to be very real that just also fell flat for me, one of which is the weird horniness between brother and sister.
I don't recall there being a lot of horniness between Billy and Kat, but to be honest with you, it's been a long time since I've read the book. I do recall that there are some elements of it that just seem bizarre in the book, where, for example, when Billy and the cheerleader Faison kiss, like they basically grind against each other while kissing, and she winds up having an orgasm from this. And it just strikes me as like, it's weird. It's like Ben Fountain clearly did a ton of research to write the book that I feel like captures the kind of banter and terminology and just general affect so well. And as someone who hadn't been in the military, he did a tremendous job. But it's like, but then you're like, but then there's that, like, bro, what's going on? So the film, I think, smartly takes that out, but then it adds this dimension, like you said, of the sort of like hinting towards the semi-incestuous with Kat and Billy. And there's a plot in the book about Billy's dad, a plot point that's sort of added in that isn't really addressed in the film, that at least I didn't seem to get it, which is that Billy's dad was basically became like a talk show radio guy and had a stroke.
Yeah.
But then after he had a stroke, it was determined that they realized that he had basically been keeping a second family. He had a secret daughter with another person. Like he's like a huge piece of shit. And basically he's kind to Billy's other sister's son, Brian, I think the little boy's name is, but he's never kind to Billy. And it's like, even after he's, become this like national figure of heroism, he's decorated for all this stuff. Like, he doesn't, he's still a piece of shit to him. So it's interesting. The degree to which I don't know why they would kind of invent, like you said, add sexual tension in a brother and sister relationship and invent that whole cloth, because this film otherwise sticks pretty close to the book. Like I watched it and thought, okay, I think this might be a little bit of dramatic license, like they've changed stuff from the book. And then I went back and read like a summary, like a chapter by chapter summary of the book, just to refresh my memory. And no, actually the plot of the film is almost beat for beat the same. It's just, obviously the like having the Midas touch to make a girl orgasm, that's not real, so they had to take that out.
They don't teach that in basic training.
Well, I'm gonna be real with you. I've known a lot of 19-year-old infantry soldiers, and I don't think any one of them is up to the task. Like, I hate to break it. But yeah, it's odd. Like, I don't know why they did that, because in a way I think that like, and in a way, too, it was a little bit strange, like in the book as well, that it's kind of created this Billy as this kind of figure of nobility that he enlisted because he had to, because he got in trouble with the law, because he he smashed up his sister's ex-fiance's car when or ex-boyfriend's car when he abandoned her after she had gotten in this accident, had been disfigured. I mean, it's true that even to this day, there are situations where people will get told, like, if you enlist, we'll drop the charges kind of stuff, or we'll downgrade the charges. But it's created the situation where, he's got like, I mean, I appreciate that he wasn't the sort of, cherubic virginal figure who then immediately has to die in combat, which is always the case in other sort of war schlock films and books. I think, what is that book called? The Yellow Birds by Kevin Powers is one that I always compare it to. It's much, much worse in this regard. Then it's also a book about the Iraq War. But I don't know. I was a little confused by this.
So I have to go back to the sister psychosexual thing, because I just found that passage in the book.
Okay.
And it's worse than you could have ever imagined.
Oh, it's worse in the book.
Possibly. Okay. Oh, it's okay. I'm gonna do a little bit of a dramatic.
No idea. Wow.
So I didn't remember this either, other than the like weird feeling that it gave me, and I knew it was in here, and now I've found it, and it's fucking. So I'm gonna read from a couple of different passages. These all happen in the movie. It kind of condenses the scene. Basically, Billy, I think before the game, gets some time off to go spend a day with his family in Fort Worth, I think it is. Blah 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 blah. Talks about Catherine having 3 beers in the morning. After her third of the morning, she was keeping pace with Billy. Catherine pranced out of the house with his purple heart pinned over her left breast and the silver star pinned over her right, the medals flopping around like a stripper's tassels. Billy and Patty howled, but their mother was not amused. What, oh these? Catherine answered in a ditzy coo when Denise asked just what she thought she was doing. Why, mother, I'm merely displaying the family jewels. Denise pronounced the whole thing indecent and ordered Catherine to return the medals to Billy's room, blah, blah, blah. She was still sporting the hardware when Mr. Whaley stopped by, I guess a neighbor, and it was worth virtually any amount of money to see this eminence's eyes bug out at the sight of Catherine, not just the medals riding high on her proud, perky breasts, but the whole tanned, taut, leggy length of her.
Jeez.
And so I read that, and no, it's worse. It gets worse. Several pages later, okay, here we go. Billy's taking a nap in his room and is like dreaming about the time when Shroom dies. His sleep broke with that throb of panic, a desperate lunge into waking. Someone was leaning over him, breathing in his face. He tipped open one eye to find Catherine staring down at him through big Angelina Jolie-style sunglasses. You better be careful over there, she murmured darkly. If anything happens to you, I'm going to kill myself. Humph. He opened both eyes, lifted his head. His sister was stretched out beside him on a beach towel, propped on an elbow with her frontage facing him. She was also, he couldn't help noticing, wearing a bikini, the sight of which cracked his lungs even if she was his sister.
What
Despite the divot in her cheek, she was undeniably hot. Long, tan legs, an amply palmable rack, tummy flat and golden brown as the most perfect pancake.
What is going on?
Yeah. It gets like literally, okay, 3 paragraphs later, it continues getting
this is
worse.
Like softcore porn.
Yes, still talking about his sister. Living at home as she had for the past 16 months, enduring all she'd endured by way of health and family troubles and getting dumped by P-Boy, Catherine had undergone drastic and interesting changes.
Oh my
For
God.
one thing, her trials had burned off all her baby fat, her tendency to pudge toward the rounder, gentler line of wholesome Christian voluptuousness.
Oh, no.
Now she sported the lean, rangy frame of a girl bartender in some kick-ass honky-tonk, if such places even existed anymore. A glossy track of keloid tissue looped over her shoulder and down her back like the dangling tail of a coil of rope. Her face was 87% recovered, she told him. Blah 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 blah. So he goes into the wounds from her car accident or whatever. Yeah, Billy's sweet, beautiful, studious, supremely square sister, who'd always been so reverent toward authority, who thought only good, clean, all-American thoughts and never cursed or denigrated anyone, she'd become a punchy hell on wheels. So it's basically saying like his sister's loss of innocence through this car accident made her like trashy and really hot
And smoking hot.
and yeah.
I'm
So
sorry.
I don't know what to do with this.
I completely
I don't
forgot
know.
about that. I was a far less sophisticated reader, I guess, when I read this that didn't make an impression on me, because the only way in which I feel as though that degree of just ambient horniness could be defended is if it was like a deliberate choice, and I know it's not the case, that like Billy is just insanely horny because like we have this concept of like it's not vulgar, but it's rude of the concept of deployment hot, that like your conception of attractiveness, if you are heterosexual, if you're attracted to women, changes so much when you're constantly in like this gross, dingy environment surrounded by dudes who smell bad, that literally someone that you would have not found attractive before you do find attractive. So if that was the only way, and I know that's not the case in this book, so it's like, you know what, this is just a man who likes writing that plus the like I said, the like Matrix 2 instant orgasm, that's indefensible.
Well, I have to ask, like, for you guys who read the book, is the writing good? Because the script of the movie is like not, I think it's not great. Like a lot of the scenes, it feels like very stagey. You know, it's like, guys, I was going to ask you, Nate, like some of this stuff really works for me. Like there's a few moments of like realism between the squad, amongst the squad, that felt real to me. A lot of it felt like this person is writing, you know, like stock figures and stereotypes. He's creating personas that have existed in like war movies, and he's building off of that. And like the hard ass Sergeant Dimes and the Zen warrior of Sergeant Shroom and all this stuff. But like Jack reading that stuff makes me wonder if maybe this is just like poorly written.
I thought it was a well-written book, but I mean, like I said, I got asked to review it for, I don't know if it's still around, but the Morning News website did the tournament of books every year, and they had 3 books that were centered around the Iraq War that year. It was The Yellowbirds, Fobbit, and Billy Lynn. And I read all 3, and I think Billy Lynn was the best of the 3, but I don't think it deserved to win that year, and it didn't. I recall the writing being there. I was very surprised at how well he captured the kind of like I said, the banter, the lingo, the turns of phrase, the kind of observations, like in sort of close third person viewpoint of how these characters perceived each other, like the descriptions. You would have thought this guy had been in the military, but yeah, like it's very, very, in retrospect, like I didn't realize just how blatantly not good that some of this stuff was. And I don't think that, I mean, like Shroom in the book, I remember a line really kind of impressing me when he was describing Shroom, that like he's less of sort of jacked bodybuilder Vin Diesel and more like described as being kind of like pudgy but really strong. Like the turn of phrase he uses, that like he looked like he could do ready up drills with a 50 cal, which basically doing like rifle drills with what's effectively an anti-aircraft gun, but it's the gun. It's the gun that saves the day in the end. When you actually see the real life version of Billy's heroic shootout, and you realize that he wasn't hitting the guy with a pistol at all, but one of his squad mates rolled up with a Humvee and a 50 cal and shot the guy. So that description of Shroom, I remember being impressed by some of these, but like I said, maybe I wasn't anywhere near as sophisticated of a reader as I thought I was. I didn't think it was bad. And Jack, I'll ask you, I don't know your impression of it. I thought Ben Fountain did a good job.
Yeah, it's been ages since I read this book, and just like thumbing through it now as I was to find the horny paragraphs that I dimly remembered. The prose itself on like a line by line level is not great. But what it does do really well is he takes some sort of stylistic risks and stuff, and what it does do very well is it really captures what we were talking about before in the sort of like the overwhelmingness of the situation that they're in. His prose does a really good job. There's a lot of adjectives and adverbs, and the descriptions of things kind of come at you in like torrent of like, he talks about like standing there on stage in his LL Bean khakis, hands in pockets, NASA windbreaker zipped to his neck, blah, 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 blah. Like that. I'm just picking randomly from a page here. Like
Ben Fountain said that he had the idea to write this book by seeing a sort of bewildered group of guys just kind of standing there for no reason doing military stuff at the 2004, I think either the Thanksgiving game or the Super Bowl, I can't remember. But he had moved to Dallas for his wife's career, and he was like, Dallas, in his opinion, was like the world's least literary and or intellectually stimulating city. And so he wanted to write about what he knew, and so he wrote this book.
And it does that very well. Like on the second page, he's got some formatting interesting stuff. This, like the second page, half of the page is like it's describing the bits of like a speech that Billy is hearing, and he's only like he's half listening, and like the words are sort of like I think who's giving this speech, just like one of the people that's talking to him, and it's just half of the page is just the words like misspelled, terrorist, freedom, 9/11 spelled Nina Levin, LEV.
Yeah,
and
it's almost like E.E. Cummings kind of stuff. Like it becomes like words across the page. And I was wondering how Ang Lee was going to recreate those, because that is a kind of important part of the book, is just sort of the zoning out, just having people just kind of talk to you about their feelings about the war.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. And they do it differently. It's like camera, dead center, person in the frame, kind of talking, they blend into each other, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that stylistic stuff in the book, I always thought, I was like, well, that's a really novel way of communicating it, of kind of capturing that feeling.
I think the style, it does that well. And what you were saying, you definitely remember right, I think, Nate, is that the dialogue in it is pretty good. The dialogue feels, even when the characters sort of delve into things that I guess now we recognize as stereotypes, and as stereotypes of the way that like GWOT guys talk, that grunts talk. I think we also might have a warped opinion of that because we've seen so many of these movies now, and we've been around that culture so much. But in the time period that it's depicting, I think as well, like, yeah, it read to me as like pretty accurate, and the characters' interactions with one another read to me as like, somewhat realistic.
I mean, to that point, Jack, like, I think that is true. A lot of this stuff now reads as stereotypical to us because we're so used to GWOT stereotypes having been formed. I mean, I guess 12 years elapsed between the events depicted in the book and the production of the movie, which kind of, to me, raises the question of like, why did they make this movie in November 2016?
Yeah.
What kind of point or what kind of artistic mission are you satisfying by releasing like a very sort of like clear-cut, anti-propagandistic GWOT movie in November 2016? The stuff in the movie that I found the funniest and the best was when they just sort like the really funny, like taking the piss out of the way propaganda was made, like when they have to record the Thanksgiving greeting on the field like a million times, or when like there's like a scene I think where they've got the whole squad up on the big screen in the stadium, and like it's actually like they're actually kind of feeling real emotion. Like Billy starts to feel real emotion. I think he might even like tear up a little bit, and then immediately afterwards is an ad for like an erectile dysfunction drug.
Yeah.
And it just like takes all the emotion out of it. That stuff was great. But then there's like other. I noted I put in my notes a line. You guys probably remember the scene where they have to get up and do like their little press conference.
Yeah.
And one of the journalists who's like doing 25% of his job is like, do you guys think you're succeeding out there in your mission? And the daydream version of what the Sergeant Dimes says is America is out there producing dozens of suicidally pissed off insurgents every day.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't say that. He says something really anodyne, but that's what he wants to say, or that's what Billy wants him to say. And I put in my notes, I'm like, that would be like a really revolutionary or a really edgy moment in a film if that film had been released in 2004.
Right.
But by 2016, that sentiment is so widely accepted that it's even accepted by Donald Trump. Like it's like Republican Party canon now, that almost canon, that the war in Iraq was a mistake that produced suicidally pissed off insurgents. And so what is this movie in 2016 really adding to the conversation?
Yeah, it's interesting too, because part of me wonders if it was just like a development hell kind of thing, because the book was pretty well received, and the fact that it sticks, in my opinion, so closely to the book makes me think that like there probably wasn't a lot of belief in the ability to like Hollywoodize this and change it into something more than just the film version of a book that succeeded by being a book kind of not like the rest of the sort of GWAT novels at the time. But one of the things that I find really interesting about it too is that in some ways this film benefits from the long stretch of time that has allowed, and the cliches and the sort of development techniques for making films like this, whether they're Marvel films that have plots set in Afghanistan or they're like supposed to be notionally serious films, which is that like some of the military stuff is quite accurate. Like there's dumb little nitpicks, but nothing really significant. In fact, there are things in it where I'm like, this is very close to how it's done, how it's supposed to be done in real life. Like, but then there's other things where you're like, what in the hell is going on? Like, I'll give you an example. The base where, you know, Sergeant Shroom is kind of giving his like Zen Buddhism lessons to Billy as they're like smoking him for having crashed the Humvee while, you know, off-roading it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, are they a special forces team deployed to Niger? Like, what the fuck is, like, they're like a big Adobe compound. Like, the Hurt Locker gets this better. Like, no, you live in like a gravel pit full of shipping containers, or, you know, trailers, like what they call container housing units turned into at best, or like a plywood bunkhouse. But like, it's not this. Whatever this is, there's not a parking lot of your vehicles and little Iraqi kids playing soccer right next to it. It's like a dream sequence practically. Like they're meditating under this big tree. I'm just like where is this supposed to be? I mean, the patrols in the market where they're like, oh, something's going to kick off, the kids alert them, like, quite frankly, that looks like footage I've seen of like the IDF patrolling in Hebron or in Jerusalem. Like, that doesn't look like Iraq, and that's not how these guys would have done it. But then, like, when they shoot the AT-4s, the anti-tank weapons, into the building, the way they call up, each one of them calls out backblast area clear, like that's exactly how it's done. The way that the reloading, the way that they're engaging, some of the language they're using, specifically like when Dime says to Billy, like, you might actually have some of the soldiering in you, or that could have been Shroom, I can't remember. They're sitting in what looks like the morale center, and you can see the little plywood cubicles and the shitty Cisco voice over IP phones, and like pallets of like Kuwaiti brand or Emirati branded like drinking water, and someone's sharpied in like a fucked up drawing of a woman and wrote, "This is hell, you died in Kuwait." That is such a bang on detail, such a well observed detail of stuff that I remember seeing like in holdover in Kuwait or in Bagram or in smaller bases. Like, it's, and you're like, but for all of that, so much of this is just unbelievably, just seems weird, and I'm sort of, I don't know what the right word is. Like, I wonder what the why here is, because it's like, yes, you've made a movie version of the book, but like there are a lot of choices of how you bring this book that has a lot of figurative language, a kind of like evocative language, to the screen, and some of it just seems strange. It seems dreamlike in a way that doesn't suit the kind of, like you described earlier, the kind of like drunken delirium, unreality that these guys are experiencing, of sort of like, you have 2 weeks back from the war, you have to be stage props, also you can drink even though you're not supposed to drink in uniform, and everyone's coming up to you and kind of like telling you their life story. Like, it's just, it's a different kind of strange, and I just didn't understand. Like, there was a part of me that was like, some of this is really good and some of this is really bad, and I just don't understand. I understand why this film wasn't successful. I don't understand why it was made this way.
Right.
Yeah, the tonal different, and like, I thought we should maybe go back in, because so Nate, one thing we do on this podcast is at the end of it we rank and sort of rate the film in a various different criteria, and one of our criteria is like each film's like operator score, which is like how accurately and in how much minute detail they portray like the actual soldiering that happens in it. And I was like conflicted on this one, because like you say, there are a few things that are like very accurate and they worked, like the AT launchers, it was very, there were some like almost like Michael Bay action sequences, like when the RPGs hit the wall that they're in, and you get this huge like blast of like of stuff that comes back through, but then also like, what someone opening up with a 50 cal right next to you does to a concrete building like in front of it and things. But then there are also like completely inexplicable stuff, like where they've got the insurgents coming out of a house like 20 meters away from them, and they're just like looking at them and no one's shooting, and then they all line up behind the wall, and
that
it's
was
like,
bizarre.
I know that.
Yeah,
I know that there was a thing where he said like, okay, wait till I initiate. But yeah, when I saw that, I was like, no, there's no way. Like they would start shooting immediately because like they can see the guys. There's notionally also the kind of pep talk telling everybody that I love you when you're stacking behind.
Yeah.
Like, if I was that civil affairs unit needing fucking rescue, I'd be like, can you all stop having this Hollywood moment and just start shooting some bullets? Yeah, like. But then
you don't get a
weirdly,
pregame huddle before troops in contact.
No. But then when Dime said, let's go get a middle school named after us. Like to me, that was really funny. But in truth, like that's less. What we'd probably say is let's go get a range named after, because some bullshit range you don't want to train on in some shitty army base. That's the level you get to if you just randomly get killed in a firefight. But I don't know. Like I would say that stuff. It's because some of the other things earlier on in the film were to me kind of like weird, like accurate, but not quite. I sort of didn't have high hopes for it, and I was actually very taken aback by some of the things. Like the concrete, they use CGI to make the kind of cinder blocks disintegrate when they're shooting it with a 50 cal. The effects of the 50 cal on the guy when the gunner shoots through that when Billy is engaging with the 9 mil. Their uniforms are better than most. I mean, there's some weird inconsistencies, but like that, I know it's a small one, but like most of the time, the dress uniforms that put people in, like they don't have like the Dime's wearing the little green felt tabs because he's the squad leader, and that's sort of the leadership thing. Like little details like that. Weirdly, Dime doesn't have. In one scene, he does have a combat infantryman's badge, and then for the rest of the movie, he only has a expert infantryman's badge. That's little tiny stuff I don't really care about. I just notice it, but like. This is better than most, as opposed to like the Hurt Locker, which gets some of the ambiance correct, but like guys are in uniforms that look cleaner than any I have ever seen in my life, and nothing, like. So it was okay. I mean, I think it's just because it's a film made in 2016, between the preponderance of films using the military or operator stuff or anything to that effect, video games. Helmet cam footage from Syria. There's just so much more, and so like I think there's a higher standard to making it. But I don't know, like it's not bad, it's not great either. Like there's some things that don't make any sense. But I think the overall thing I'd say, whether for the plot or for the operator-ness, is that there are things in this film that seem more accurate than what I was expecting, and certainly more accurate than I've seen in a lot of films. And then there are other things that seem so inexplicable that it's just. Like what was the effect you were going for here? Because if this is meant to be portraying like notionally portraying the reality like in their recollection, like it genuinely feels to me like a dream sequence. But then again, I'll be honest with you, the plot of the Hurt Locker, some of its visual details and accuracy notwithstanding, the plot of the Hurt Locker might as well be like if Silence of the Lambs also had like Bollywood dance numbers level of crazy, like just completely. I'm not and also we used to have this joke about this when I was in that like. If you actually filmed an accurate war movie, it would be 13 hours long. It would suck the entire time. But for 15 minutes of it, like it would be 12 hours and 45 minutes would be the most boring shit you'd ever seen. And then 15 minutes of it, like the seats in the movie theater would electrocute you. Like, so there's a level of like, you got to just understand the sort of rules of the game here. Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, that this is like a thing that, we are not the first people to discover the paradox of the war movie, which is also like the paradox of Scorsese's gangster movies, which, he kind of seemed to take in and address with Killers of the Flower Moon, which is how can you make a movie that is going to entice your viewer while also making them realize how horrible the thing is that they're watching. And that's why it was Godard or someone who said you can't make an anti-war movie. I mean, even Saving Private Ryan, despite its horror, is such a amazing drama and such a propulsive narrative that you can't stop watching. And I don't think
it's about the boys hiking through France and like
it's the boys on like a violent hike. But like, so one question I had is so much of this. So many of these themes, and this is in part due to sort of the universal unchanging nature of war, have been explored in art going, 80 years ago. There's not a ton that this movie is saying that wasn't, for example, said in what I think might be the best war movie of all time, which is Kubrick's Paths of Glory about World War I. You know, like generals who don't care about you, throwing you into a fight, the way that you're treated when you get back home, that kind of stuff. And so this movie at the end, with Shroom's sort of like spirit reappearing to Billy Lynn, Shroom has been the sort of the spiritual center of this movie, the guy who Billy turns to when he needs to make sense of all the craziness. And I think Shroom, in my notes, he says something like, I'm not saying it's right, but I'm not saying it's wrong either. It just is. And then I think Billy, in his own voice, one of his final lines is, we're a nation of children. We go somewhere else to grow up. Maybe we die.
That was Shroom, I think.
Or that's Shroom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like we have to go,
That's
go
right.
abroad to grow up or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's Shroom giving kind of this like coda to the film. And, you know, Shroom is obviously a Buddhist, and for him, like, to desire anything is something that we need to let go of. We need to let go of our search for meaning. But to me, and maybe this is just because of, like, you know, my politics, it almost ends up feeling like a bit of a cop-out in terms of it's nice for you, Shroom, or you, Ong Lee, or you, the writer of this book, to end with sort of this Zen-like lack of meaning that you're able to draw from the war. On the other hand, doesn't that risk us kind of falling into that thing that Jack, you and I have talked about on previous episodes, that I think it was like some Scottish comedian who said, like, Americans will go to war and then they'll make a movie about how going to war made them so sad.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
They'll come and fuck up your country, and then they'll make a movie about how sad it made them to, like, kill you. Does this movie fall into that trap at all?
So thinking about that, the Frankie Boyle quote that you're talking about, you know, Americans will make a war movie about how sad it made their soldiers to go to your country and kill you. I think that there's a degree to which it brings back a point you raised earlier, which is that this film being notionally made in 2015, 2016, released at the end of 2016, about events in 2004, it doesn't necessarily benefit with hindsight, because it doesn't really have much to say about the war in Iraq. It other than, like, what effectively amounts to kind of a platitude about, like, oh yeah, well, Americans don't know shit about shit. Right, they don't. But also, I don't necessarily think that we're that special. We just happen to have the world's biggest defense budget, and a system of government that basically makes it very, very easy for politicians to deploy troops abroad. But, like, I don't think that there's nothing really much said about the war in Iraq in this film, other than the fact that, for example, Catherine, I agree with your point from earlier. Catherine is espousing an anti-war view that would have been controversial in 2004, and it isn't now, because it's basically, it's like, well, why wouldn't you feel this way? Everyone else is just a propagandized idiot, but not her and the brother that she's horny for. But he's in the book, if I remember correctly, Billy doesn't have to be convinced that he's going to go back with his squad, and Faison is upset about that he has to go back, and he kind of knows it's not going to work out, but, like, there's no way he's not going to go back. Whereas it feels as though, like, the film portrays it that Faison basically be like, oh, you can't just quit, you're a hero, blah blah blah. Like, kind of it's his desire to score with her, to make that work, that makes him go back. And then you have this kind of hallucinatory sequence where instead of walking into the limo, he goes into the Humvee, replete with old MRE wrappers for food and, like, a Buddhist statue that Shroom has on the dashboard. And they have this conversation. It doesn't really have much to say. I mean, but I'll be honest with you, I haven't really seen any things about any global war on terror films that really feel as though they have much to say about it, in the sense that at the end of the day, I think, weirdly, one of the only films that I feel like captures this, and it's based on a better book, is Jarhead. Because Jarhead kind of captures the degree to which, like, a lot of this has to do with a system that basically takes bored 19-year-olds who are looking for something and puts them in this impossible situation. And you can show the most anti-war film on the planet. They're going to watch it in the barracks drunk as hell, being like, hell yeah, get to the part where stuff explodes. It doesn't really matter. I don't really think this film has much to say about Iraq or about the war, about America. I just think that, I don't know, like, have you guys ever seen Ghost World? It has Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson.
No.
Early
No, I don't think so.
2000s, based on Dan Clewes's graphic novel. It's basically about this friendship between these two teen girls, and this girl who kind of pursues a relationship with a jazz record collector or blues record collector, is played by Steve Buscemi, who's much older than her. But it has this way of like everyone in the film who's not these three core characters is a fucking idiot. They're a dumb redneck. All they do is just consume the stupidest, most banal shit. And like this film isn't that. Like they're obsessed with these just moronic fake art movies. You know, people go to Blockbuster trying to find Fellini's 8.5, and they get recommended, you know, the Mickey Rourke film 9.5 Weeks. Like that is constant. Everyone's a moron. And this film is not that far off from that in terms of like every civilian's an idiot, except for, you know, the young guy that they smoke a joint with, who's like, well, I'm probably going to join the army because I have nothing else. My life sucks and I need health insurance for my family. And they're offering $6,000 bonuses. By 2006, 2007, they were offering $40,000 bonuses.
Wow.
I had a dude who joined, and we asked, why did you join? He's like, well, I got a DUI and I wrecked a telephone pole, and the state of Arizona was going to charge me $42,000, and the army offered me $43,000 to enlist airborne infantry. And then he came back from deployment and got a third DUI and got kicked out of the army. So like,
Oh my God.
so in that regard, like, I think that, yeah, there's a part of me that's like, I don't really know what it's trying to say, because to engage with the subject matter is gonna, and to actually talk about it honestly, I don't know, like, I don't know if you could make a movie. I certainly don't think, I mean, this movie didn't do very well. This does it better than many others. And I've talked a long time, so I'm happy to see it here and just take your guys' thoughts.
I think maybe a good way to put it that you're getting at here is that the movie does a very good job at the things that we've just talked about, which is capturing a particular experience and feeling that rings true to people who have also experienced and felt that. What it's not good at is assigning any kind of like sort of politics or like greater point to that. And I think it thinks as a film that it does, but it really sort of doesn't. But the other problem, and the part of the problem with that, is that the experience and the feeling that it conveys, which is basically that like, it kind of fucking sucks to be a soldier in the army, and it kind of fucking sucks to be a soldier in the army who comes back and has everyone saying, damn, it's awesome that you're a soldier in the army, is that experience that it captures very well is not something that even still anybody really wants to think about or feel, right? And that sort of, I guess, kind of stunts the politics and obviously as well the earnings of the movie of it too, because it's just kind of like, here's this thing that sucked, right?
Yeah. And people want to ask you, like, what's it like to kill someone? What's it like to shoot this cool? What does this huge gun do to people? That kind of thing. And it's like, yeah it's weird, but I think there's a certain degree of like, this is not a standard war story military movie, but something that's in the book that is not in the film is, I think, the degree to which it's much more overt that Billy has never encountered this kind of like gratuitous wealth before, and he immediately is taken aback and disgusted by it. There's a scene in particular where, you know, they realize wandering around in the book that like they go to the official Cowboys merchandise shop, and they realize that, like, you know, back in 2004, 2005, soldiers would be getting paid like junior soldiers would not be making. I mean, after taxes would be probably making anywhere between, let's hope, $1,300 to about $1,600 or $1,700 a month, and that a Dallas Cowboys jacket was $679. I remember that line in the book. There's like, that's disgusting. You know, they have a signed autographed football, and Billy finds the most redneck, kind of like scraggly, ugly looking kid he can find and gives it to him instead of like kids who look like they're suburban. And one of the soldiers is like, bro, that football could get you $1,000, and he just does it because he's just kind of grossed out by the whole thing.
Right.
As a comment of sort of like, at the end of the day, I think bring it back to I mentioned having read these interviews with Ben Fountain. A lot of this comes from the fact that this is a book based on Ben Fountain just being like, Dallas is hell on earth. Like, this is the worst place on the planet. And the story all kind of flows from there. And I'm not averse to that interpretation, but it's just more like,
and he's not wrong.
No,
he's really not.
But is it saying much about, like, is it saying anything that hasn't been said already? Like, you know, weirdly, they're considered far more cliche, but like, you realize that, for example, Full Metal Jacket and Apocalypse Now both have, help me out, there's a guy who wrote Michael Herr wrote Dispatches. He punched up the script, the dialogue in the script. Some of the vignettes from his book appeared as scenes in Full Metal Jacket. He also wrote the monologue that I believe Martin Sheen is the voice out. I mean, he's the actor, but I don't know if he does the voiceovers as well for Apocalypse Now. And those seem kind of, I don't know, maybe a little bit overdone. Like, it's the classic kind of bombast war movie, Apocalypse Now at least. But I don't know, some of those, at least to me, seem like they've got more to say versus stuff that wants to kind of be like, we're holding up a mirror to America, but it's like, nah, are we really? Or is it just sort of, is this just sort of like an approximation? Because, I mean, I don't know, there's a lot of it that just, I don't know, it feels like, to use a really dated reference, I feel like I'm kind of watching the mannequin people with the weird smiles from the Black Hole Sun music video. Like, it just seems everything's overstated.
Yeah, and I think that like the Dallas aspects of this movie I enjoyed a lot. Like the stuff that made me laugh, you know, like when they're chowing down in the like box seats and like Ang Lee turns up like the volume on their like mouth noises to make them all like sound like piggies, and like all these weird Texas characters are coming up to them to like ask them questions and they're giving them all sorts of shit. Steve Martin as the Cowboys owner, I felt like if you had told me that was going to be his role, I would have thought, okay, that like he could really do that, but like he doesn't know how to do a Southern accent, and he's like not allowed to be that funny. I really wanted like that character to just be like really slimy. Yeah, and that kind of fell flat for me. The cheerleader, I think you might have had a note here, Jack. Is that Mackenzie Lee?
Yeah. My note in my notes, and again. Sorry for being the horny one on the pod, but I had a note that just said Mackenzie Lee, hottest woman to never be cast in a single thing again after this movie. Which, if you look at the time frame of this movie, she had like recurring or like main cast roles on like things like the like Batman prequel on the CW, Gotham or something like that. And like I recognized her instantly rewatching this movie. I was like, I feel like I've seen her in things. And then I looked her up and like, it's just basically nothing. So yeah.
The thing about her role in this movie is that she plays like kind of a vapid cheerleader perfectly.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how he addresses her character in the book, because the movie treats her like very kindly. I think, you know, like she's clearly like not incredibly smart, but she's also the only one who seems to like legitimately care about Billy. One of the biggest laugh lines for me, and I don't know if it was intended as a laugh line or not, but when she and Billy first like are starting to get to know each other off to the side of the press conference, and he's like, what do you like about being a cheerleader? And she's like, the spiritual aspect of it. It's just like, I like that role. I mean, I like that, you know, after like the asshole dudes who are setting up the Destiny's Child stage, like fuck with them, the cheerleaders come to the rescue.
Yeah.
You know, like the thing the movie keeps emphasizing is that none of the people actually like give a single fuck about these soldiers. The owner of the Cowboys doesn't give a fuck. The guy sitting in the stands in front of them who like gets choked out by one of them doesn't care about them at all. The guys on the stage don't care about them at all. Destiny's Child doesn't care about them at all.
One of the dancers tells him to fuck off when he's when Billy is standing at his mark. Like,
that seemed needlessly aggressive too.
Yeah.
Like that dancer's mid performance and he's pausing to tell the soldier to fuck off. I don't know, Nate, like, one of Jack's notes in here was like, did you ever have to participate in any kind of like public facing event like this? Or did you ever, like, I don't think people, correct me if I'm wrong, but like probably a Destiny's Child dancer didn't come up to you and tell you to fuck off in the face because you're a soldier.
No, I remember that by the time that I got back from deployment, I basically pinned captain a couple of months, like maybe 2-3 months after I got back. So my soldiers would have to do a lot of dumb stuff like that. I mean, if I had to do it, it was like everyone had to do it. We had to be filling. I mean, I remember when I was stationed in Korea, they had to fill seats, so we all had to go to this K-pop concert on Camp Casey, and I had to stand in the audience for the band Crayon Pop to perform their song "Jumping." Weird things like this. But I mean, in terms of the encountering,
dude,
the
public,
if you
get the K-pop stands coming after this podcast, that's gonna. Well, I mean, it might be good for exposure, but like we could get murdered.
That's so many generations ago. I don't know if there's any hardcore ride or die Crayon Pop fans out there.
I think you would be surprised.
The bicycle helmets and they jumped, and the song was called "Jumping." But what I would say is that I think that the public facing. I'll give you an example. So the details aren't super important, but my when I was a operations officer, the actual head of battalion ops, and I had to go up to a different base. We were stationed in Anchorage, Alaska. We had to go up and talk to the aviation unit in Fairbanks, which is a very long drive. So we flew. They gave us a ride because they were down for training. So we flew on their Chinook helicopters back to Fairbanks to Fort Wainwright. But on the way back, we had to book through government travel. And have a civilian flight, like a one-way civilian flight from Fairbanks back to Anchorage. And my we were getting on a military aircraft. We had to be in uniform, and my boss was like, we're only going to be there for one night. And he was like, just make sure you bring civilian clothes, just in case it once we're in the airport, it forestalls any unnecessary conversations. And what he was former Ranger guy. And what he meant was like, civilians are just going to be weird. It's going to be weird. And you don't want to have that people projecting their shit on you. When I came back from deployment on mid-tour, you had to be in uniform. And I was like, I don't mind, but like, imagine you're trying to get a flight and people are stopping you while you're trying to get to the gate to be like, to thank you. And I'm like, I don't fucking know you. Like, I'm not trying to be rude and I appreciate it, but it's like, but I'm trying to get home to see my parents. A guy insisting on buying me a drink, and I'm like, I can't drink in uniform, dude. Like, you can buy me a drink and I will look at it and I'll give it to someone else, but I can't, like, that kind of thing where it's like, I'm not even trying to be rude or disrespectful so much as like, you realize that it's about them. It's about how they feel. It's not about you as a person. And that I think, because there was so much emphasis on how no one in human history has sacrificed as much as American troops in the view of American politics, news, etc. It created this sensation of incredible guilt on the part of a lot of Americans. Like, to this day, talking about PTSD and stuff, trying to communicate, like, you don't have to qualify, but like, oh, it's nothing like what the troops went through. Like, it's the same thing. If you probably have worse PTSD than a lot of people who have been in the military, just if you were in a bad car accident, for example. But just being able to call it that, people don't want to. And so I think that there was definitely this sort of notion, especially back then in America, of like, you are a bad person if you don't respect the troops. You should do it at all times. And being on the receiving of that, like I said, like, you appreciate the sentiment to some degree, but it can be very, very strange. And I had to march in a parade when I was like a college ROTC cadet, but like, I don't really count that because, I was basically, I wore a uniform like twice a week for 2 hours each time, and then that was it. When I was actually in, I'm really trying to rack my brain for things that we ever had to do where it was public facing, and I don't recall. I mean, like I said, that everything was in a military context, other than like, I don't know, going to like the deployment ceremony where like Governor Sarah Palin gave a speech. Like, I can't think of anything. And I'm kind of grateful for that too. But quite frankly, like, that sort of thing is less common. And if you're in the old guard or you're in some kind of unit that their job is to do military performance stuff, if you're a recruiter, then you do that more. But I mean, I would definitely Ben Fountain said that he saw these guys that were kind of there for a support the troops thing, just kind of standing there in uniform in 2004. And I can't recall if they were active duty troops that were like on rotation back from Iraq, or if they were just guys who were in uniform from like Fort Hood or Fort Bliss or something. But he's like, it must be so strange for those guys standing there, and so he created this thing. I don't, in my mind, I can't think of anything where I can recall like guys being brought home on like a press junket. That seems like a kind of a World War II vintage thing. Yeah. So I don't know.
So we've been through a lot on this film. It's been interesting on this show doing a film that honestly I think is pretty good all around. It falls short in some areas, but I'd seen this film a number of years ago, and in rewatching it does do a pretty good job of capturing a feeling and an aspect of the global war on terror that I don't think anything we've seen so far on the show has really gotten into. We've seen PTSD depicted in various other movies, American Sniper among them, but it doesn't really get, American Sniper's view of PTSD is so much just this like super macho, roided out guy, like struggling with his emotions and like getting mad in his truck, which is I think a very different depiction of PTSD than you get, as you've mentioned, Nate, with like a 19-year-old Army specialist or private first class coming back from his first like extremely intense emotional deployment overseas. So what we usually close out these shows with is sort of rating the movie, not necessarily a strict ranking of how good we think the movie is, but we rate it in a couple of different categories. So we give every film that we watch a score of out of 5 in 3 categories. We give it a realism score as to how sort of close the events and experiences in the movie are to something that would happen in real life. We give it a jingoism score, which is, as you would expect, kind of how patriotic and how much it furthers the grand American imperial project. And then our last one is we give it an operator score, which is, in our not professional estimation, but knowing a little bit about these things, how accurate the guys moving around and actually doing the soldiering and war fighting is. So, Evan, do you want to go first? Are you ready with your ratings?
Yeah, I'll just shoot from the hip. I'll freestyle it.
Yeah, give us what you got.
Well, I mean, I think it's explicitly an anti-jingoist movie, and I think it does a pretty good job at that. At every moment in this movie is more or less designed to take the piss out of the U.S. military industrial sports Beyonce complex, to make it all look like perhaps a empty, fruitless endeavor, to show that people are signing up because they have no other option. It, even if there is honor and glory to be found in the military, this movie does not suggest that there is. So I'm going to say it's not a 0, because it suggests that if you join the military, you could end up on stage with Beyonce. It doesn't, and Billy Lynn doesn't actually get his head blown off. So it's not as low as it could be. I'm going to say it's either a 1.5 or a 2, just because it's a 1.5. I almost went 2, but this movie thinks that the military industrial complex is such a hilarious failure that I can't go higher than 1.5. So it's a 1.5. That's jingoism. Realism, I really want to just totally defer to Nate on the realism thing. I think, taking what he said into account, you've got some aspects of this that are like just bizarre and they're only there for storytelling purposes and they're totally unrealistic. And then you have a couple of things where they're like, Ang Lee was very clearly like, this 2 second of video must be extremely realistic. Not the 2 seconds before it, not the 2 seconds after, or like the hour before it, but like this specific moment when they step back with their anti-tank launchers has to be extremely realistic. So I'm gonna say that it's like a maybe like a 6. The heightened like the vigilance that he has, like walking through a market, paying close attention to like what a guy's doing with his lighter and flipping a blanket and stuff. Having never been in a war zone, but having been in tense reporting environments, walking down the street, I kind of felt that. So I appreciated that. Operator score, just as low as jingoism. I'm going to say 2 out of 10. There's like a very short operator moment when they go to save their buddies. But it's preceded by them taking a good 90 seconds to assure each other that they all love each other.
You don't think that the guy doing a rear naked choke on the kid at the football game is an operator moment? I thought that was pretty operator.
And on my challenge coin is a winking Dallas Cowboys cheerleader doing a high leg kick.
Okay. Cheerleader on the challenge coin. All right. Yeah, you took that one. Great. Yeah, I think I'll jump in. We'll let Nate have the last word. I'll start with realism as well. I'm kind of with you. I think it's weird to describe a movie that is filmed in the sort of surreal style that it was as realistic. But I would say it gets a strong sort of 3 to 4 out of 5, just in that it seems like it pretty accurately depicted an experience and a sort of type of feeling that people who participated in these wars actually had. And it definitely realistically depicted, a phenomenon that we all saw happening in the culture at the time, which is these just like, one of my notes in this was just, damn, the NFL is incredibly stupid. And like I like football for better or worse, but you see this shit and you remember that like this is still stuff that they do. Like they're still having the Blue Angels do flyovers at games, and it's just it's absolutely absurd. I think jingoism score, I think this gets sort of a straight 1. I think the only thing that it does get some jingoism points for is that the end of the movie and sort of the final point of the movie is that there's never any choice for Billy, that he's going to like go back with his brothers. Like he's going to do the right thing by the unit, which I think as well, anyone watching him, like it's interesting that the only opportunity that he's presented to get out of his situation is basically like, you know, his sister's setting up this like slightly shady that you can't imagine would have worked out well for him way to like basically skirt duty to try and get like a PTSD diagnosis. And then, you know, when the guy tells him you'll get an honorable discharge, I mean, Nate probably knows better than us, but like, I feel like that's, you know, the military would have found some way to screw him on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's one of those things where you have to think for a second that he's literally, it's not just the figurative you're leaving your friends behind thing. Like they're literally waiting for him in the car. So for him to abscond, like it's just one of those things where you can't imagine he's would actually do it. And I mean, it really depends. I've seen people who got lawyers manage to get, because at a certain point in the army just doesn't want to deal with fighting it. And I've also seen people, I saw a guy who got caught years after going AWOL on leave from Iraq get sentenced to court-martial and got sentenced to like 10 years prison time for it. So I mean, like it really depends on how much the command wants to do it. You have to do your operator score though, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So I got to do operator. So I had 4 out of 5 challenge coins for realism. Give it a 1 out of 5 challenge coins for jingoism, and my operator score as well. Yeah, I think I'm going to rate it pretty low, 1.5 to 2, maybe an operator score. I think as you were saying, like some of the nice details that it gets of military life correctly are the ones that aren't really anything to do with the fighting, the little bits on the uniforms and how the soldiers talk to one another and how they, you know, move around and stuff like that. But yeah, you know, you don't get a pregame huddle before going in to break up an ambush. You don't usually, I don't know anything really about infantry doctrine, but I don't think it's like all lining up behind one wall and firing fully automatic in the general direction of what's going on.
Well, no, and quite frankly, Bravo Squad, if I remember correctly, in the actual article, the text of the book, is they are Bravo Company, as it says, 1 nation, 2 weeks, 8 American heroes. Though technically there is no such thing as Bravo Squad. They are Bravo Company, 2nd Platoon, 1st Squad, said squad being comprised of teams Alpha and Bravo. But the Fox embedded reporter christened them Bravo Squad, and thus they were presented to the world. So the idea that they were being sent, they were part of an infantry company, thus, and also an infantry platoon. So like they are one of the typically 3 to 4 maneuver elements, depending on how it's configured, of a platoon. Like they'd have a platoon. Like it wouldn't just be them. It wouldn't be a 9-man squad. It'd be like, hey guys, go.
Right.
Yeah, that's just so there's just simply no way. And you're right. Like they would line up on a wall if one squad was doing the support by fire position and then an entire other squad was assaulting through. But like just them doing no. But I mean,
yeah. I also thought it was funny how they like set up that encounter, which is that they're essentially just like driving down the street like a patrol cop, and they get something over the radio like, hey, you need to go respond. Like they're not the designated like quick reaction force. They're not that. They're just
that is actually not that unrealistic in the sense that like their platoon might get orders from higher that, hey, this is happening, drop what you're doing, go. That happened to us a lot. But the idea of a squad on their own, Hollywood movies tend to do this with GWAT stuff, that they can't seem to understand that like if you were rolling out with just 2 Humvees and it was into a bad situation, like the likelihood of you getting overwhelmed was so high that like they just wouldn't do that. Yeah. Like if I remember correctly, we weren't allowed to go out in units of smaller, like convoys of smaller than 4 vehicles, and that would be kind of stretching it. So like, yeah, I'll let you finish your train of thought, but like, yeah, a lot of this stuff is, once again, it's like suddenly we're watching the circus and it's pandas on unicycles, but they, for some reason, are really good on specific stuff about like how they carry weapons, because they've been, they've done the Hollywood boot camp thing. Right.
Yeah. So I think 1 operator score as well. And my challenge coin, oh man. On my challenge coin, I think is a single pack of Advil.
honestly, I think I'm going to go with 2 on realism, in the sense that I think that in general, it's kind of like somewhere between the whole intention is to be halfway between like hallucination and farce. And so I don't think this was intended to be, in a way, I don't necessarily think that it was intended to be played as straight as Ang Lee plays it, because the book doesn't play it that straight at all. For jingoism, yeah, I'd say 2, because I think like another movie that's not a GWAT film that was made in the same era, though, is Tigerland, and that is a Vietnam film, but like similar situation. The guy who makes it his mission to try to like find ways to help people get out of going to war, given the chance to abscond from this training camp in Louisiana to not go to Vietnam, shows up and goes to Vietnam. So it's like that always seems to be the thing. Hollywood can't countenance the idea that someone could be heroic by not deploying. And so,
Yeah.
of course, like I think there's a subtle implicit message there. You mentioned Saving Private Ryan, and weirdly, like I fucking hate that movie. I think it's like one of the most fascist pieces of art ever made. However, weirdly, the one scene that I feel like gets the overall spirit, I mean, obviously the opening sequence is the opening sequence, but the scene where they're at the sort of like casualty collection point / sort of like reorganization point, and they encounter the glider pilot who's like, they didn't tell me that they put all these extra steel plates on this glider. It fucked up my drag coefficient. I could barely stop this thing from crashing. Killed 22 of my guys. Killed the general it was supposed to protect. Like, what the fuck is going on? And the guys are making jokes, basically doing like trading cards with the dog tags of the dudes who's all been killed, whose names don't match, while some of these units are walking by watching them do that. That one scene is like, holy fucking shit, dude. Like that is the only thing that captures it. It captures it better than so many films I've seen. But like similar with this, weird details, weird things will be really, really good. And then randomly it's just, it's just, it still tells the story of like, yeah, you gotta do the thing you gotta do for heroism and for country's sake. And you gotta stab the guy in the fucking, in the steel, or the concrete, what's it called?
Drainage ditch thing.
Drainage ditch, culvert or whatever, much like...
It was funny, I had in my notes, they just sort of recreated the Saving Private Ryan knife scene in that as well. They're like, oh, what do we need for drama? Let's have 2 guys like wrestle over a K-bar. Like,
and what's funny is that like him just not paying attention because he's freaking out trying to treat this guy, and running up at him and shooting him, that's actually really realistic. But then it turns into this I was kind of wondering how they were going to play it. I was like, because obviously he has to have survived, but like of course he turns into he John Rambo's him, but but so I would say like jingoism, I still think it's 2, even as much as it wants to purport itself to not be. I think it is. Operator, I'd say 2 also. The attention to detail on certain things, but like by and large it's still like it's not necessarily interesting, just like what was the video game America's Army, the sort of army sponsored made video game for PlayStation 2. Like it seems like a fun game to play. It's annoying. Like it's the same thing. It wouldn't be fun if they stuck to it doctrinally, but like obviously that's not why you're watching the movie. But no, it's not. And my so I'd say my overall score is probably, I want to say 3, 2, and 2.
Okay.
And my challenge coin has the Saab logo on it because Saab Bofors is the manufacturer of the M136 AT-4 anti-tank missile. And great advertisement for how one uses an AT-4. I saw the guy take the AT-4 to the truck. I was like, oh, what are they doing with that? They literally call out backblast area clear, which you kind of wouldn't need to do, but like people, when they're freaked out, do the thing they're trained to do.
Yeah.
And so like just like the first time I jumped out of a plane, I counted 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 because like that's what they drilled into you in airborne school.
Yeah.
And so it's just an automatic reaction. And yeah, I mean, is the AT-4 the best thing to be using since it's meant to be to penetrate armor, to shoot against a building? No, but like they got rid of the law, they got rid of the law. They don't trust soldiers with recoilless rifles like a Carl Gustav if they're not in special ops units, for good reason, because those things fucking destroy everyone's eardrums. So you got the AT-4 and maybe a small D. So yeah,
there you go.
Saab, the Saab logo is on it, and that's my take.
Saab is also the make of the car that the sister's ex-boyfriend drive. There's another Saab mentioned in the movie. I forgot.
You're right. Exactly. Saab is the covert sponsor of this film. They're the ones who wanted it to get made.
Yeah, which was so funny because I was thinking about like in 2004, like Saab is not a car brand that I think about very much at all. Like I know they, they make jets and they make military equipment and everything like that. But like in terms of like your average like American guy, like what are they going to be like? Yeah, man, he had a sick car. Like it was a Saab
This frat boy
like,
in
what?
Texas is driving a Saab because secretly he's got like this cosplay fetish that he wants to be like Hugh Grant's character in a Richard Curtis movie from the 90s. Like,
yeah, he's just a big Francophile, you know? Like,
yeah, he couldn't get a Peugeot in Texas, so he had to get a Saab.
But Nate, did you? These are obviously low scores, but sometimes a low score indicates a good movie. But did you like the movie?
Yeah, you know what? I really hated the first 30 minutes of it, and that's why it felt like such a slog to make myself watch it. But actually, I was surprised how much I wound up enjoying it. I mean, I think the fact that it kind of note for note recaptures the stuff in the book, I just think that the book handles it better because the book is a little bit more arch. Mm-hmm. But I think that like the casting is good. They got people, even if they weren't the right age, that looked the right age. Like they, I definitely think that across the board, like they just look like young junior soldiers. The Steve Martin maybe a little bit badly cast, but I definitely think Joe Alwyn, although he's not 19, pulls off 19. Looks like, I mean, literally he looks like one of my soldiers that I knew in real life who, God rest him, decided to become an officer and is still in. So I mean, whatever. Garrett Hedlund as Sergeant Dime, I think he pulls that off. It's a little bit jumped up, but I think Dime kind of breaks through. He kind of breaks character of being the hard ass. Yeah, I think in terms of portraying the kind of relationship, like when these guys are in the Humvee limo and are just joking and laughing with each other, like seeing that portrayed, like that's closer. But I'm not going to do the accent, but I had a Puerto Rican first sergeant, and he hated The Hurt Locker, and we watched The Hurt Locker on DVDs that we bought from the counterfeit DVD guy on Fob Sharana, Afghanistan, which when you think about the counterfeit DVD plot in that film was very funny. And he said, he's like, this movie is bullshit. And 20 years from now, everyone's going to think this is what Iraq was like. And it's going to be because of liberals like you, sir. And so to me, it's like this film, at least, if you come away from it being like, oh, yeah, most guys in an army unit, no matter how much you get hyped up this idea that they're super soldiers, are just like kids kind of doing whatever they're told and hopefully and not fucking around too much. And just like they're basically like 19-year-olds anywhere else.
Yeah.
Speaking of casting, shout out to my wife Hijab for identifying Joe Alwyn as the former longtime boyfriend of Taylor Swift.
I thought that name sounded familiar, but I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember who he'd been tied to.
I mean, Joe Alwyn being English and pulling off an American accent as well. Once again, it's unfair the degree to which, I mean, I guess it's easier for them than it is for us to living here now for 5 years. It's just impossible to kind of penetrate the hieroglyphics of their accents, but. Mm-hmm. He could have fooled me. So, yeah, you know what? I think the casting was good.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, Nate, this has been a fantastic episode. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Nate.
Yeah,
Thank you,
once
guys.
Again, Nate hosts Trash Future and What a Hell of a Way to Die, two
and
very good
Lions
podcasts.
Led by Donkeys as well.
Oh, and Lions Led by Donkeys.
Yeah, I'm the producer of Lions Led by Donkeys, which is a military disasters podcast. I'm now one of the co-hosts as well.
Oh, fantastic!
And I produce a movie podcast called Kill James Bond, which is basically started as a Bond review, anti-Bond review podcast by three extremely funny people who are all trans and wanted to talk about Bond films as sort of conveying a certain idea about masculinity, and it's now just become a movie podcast, and it's extremely funny. I highly recommend it. It's the most fun I have in a week is producing that and listening to their recording. So, Trash Future, Hell of a Way, Lions Led by Donkeys, and Kill James Bond are my 4 shows. So, if those are any of those interests you, please check them out.
Cool. Thanks, Nate.